Following the First World War, scuttling of the High Seas Fleet, and the subsequent Treaty of Versailles, Germany was left with a rump of a fleet consisting of old, outdated battleships, torpedo boats, other smaller craft, and critically to us, 6 obsolete light cruisers. These being Arcona, Medusa, Amazon, Phidias, Nymph, and Niobe. As the righteous Marina and the future Kriegsmarine commissioned newer and more modern light cruisers, these older cruisers were slowly phased out, being used in various other roles, including refits to be used as a floating anti-aircraft platform. Ships like Arcona or Medusa were used extensively in this role, along with ships from other nations like the Netherlands and Norway. The list of ships includes cruisers and coastal defense ships, and today's video will cover those German cruisers. I'm going to need you to work with me here for a second and visualize this with me. You're part of the German Admiralty in the summer of 1940 and your naval bases are being bombed. You're trying to find some ways to protect your bases. There's plenty of anti-aircraft guns to place at these bases, ranging from Germany to Norwegian coasts, but it takes time to install them and get them to bases. There had to be some way to get more AA guns to these bases and fast. Well, quite a few ships were lying around that could be transformed into floating anti-aircraft batteries, including the old German cruisers, old Dutch cruisers, as well as old Dutch and Norwegian coastal defense ships that would make a great platform to attach AA guns to them. To make things clear before we get into it, the Germans decided to make things confusing and rename those Dutch and Norwegian vessels to the names of the old cruisers, not to be confused with them. There are 6 AA vessels that we'll talk about eventually. The Arcona and Medusa were the old German cruisers we're going to talk about today. Simple enough. The Ariadne was the ex-Dutch Hertog Hendrik, a coastal defense ship. Niobe was the ex-Dutch Gelderland, a cruiser. The Nymph and Phidias were the ex-Norwegian coastal defense ships. I'm not even going to try to pronounce these, so I'm going to put them up on screen now, just so we're clear about things. Looking at the German-like cruisers at the outbreak of the Second World War, the surviving old German cruisers initially had humble roles, such as accommodation ships and the like, notably for the U-boat arm of the Kriegsmarine. However, as I mentioned before, there were concerns about the level of protection available to German naval bases, leading to our 2 ships, the Arcona and Medusa, being refitted for new roles, along with foreign ships. Arcona was taken in hand at the Deutsche and Kiel during May-June of 1940. No attempt was made to put her propulsion machinery unused for nearly 2 decades back into order, and you can't really blame them. Instead, she was to be towed around. Anyway, the fore-funnel was cut down to form the support for a searchlight, although the after-funnel was retained for good reason, as those boilers were still active, supplying steam for heating and electrical power generation. Of course, when it comes to weaponry, her outfit varied throughout this part of her career, with additions and things being taken off. Her paint scheme varied depending on where she was. Initially, though, she was fitted with 4 10.5 centimeter 4.1 inch 45 caliber high-angle guns, initially fitted in the locations formerly occupied by the main battery of the ship on the fork and poop deck. These required the addition of large sponsons protruding over the sides to provide sufficient space for the gun crews for all-round firing. For close-in defense, the main battery was supported by a single 3.7 centimeter gun and 6 single 2 centimeter guns forward. Amidships and aft, Arcona was rapidly brought into service, being anchored in the Schilling roadstead, some 19 kilometers or 11.8 miles north of the dockyard, and linked to a wider defense of local anti-aircraft guns. From here, she scored her first successful hits against enemy aircraft in late July 1940. She was moved to shallower waters later that year due to fears of aerial torpedoes. And in early January 1941, she was brought into the inner harbor of Wilhelmshaven, where in the summer she was given her first major refit, including 2 90-centimeter searchlights. A new fire control director with a 6-meter rangefinder was fitted, exchanging positions with the after searchlight, returning to service at the end of August, but was withdrawn to the inner port in January 1942 due to icing in the Jade Estuary. while in the dockyard in mid-February awaiting the March thaw. She and her half-sister Medusa were put on high alert, owing to the presence of the battleship Charhorst in the dockyard for initial repairs. Following the Channel Dash, Arcona left dock on March 17th, but due to the harsh winter, had to remain within the port for 2 more months, seeing further refits including radar and more 10.5-centimeter guns, along with the relocation of the 3.7-centimeter guns. Where to take from Aidan Dodson and Dirk Nodelman in their article from Warships 2023. They write, having temporarily replaced Medusa on the south side of Wilhelmshaven during her half-sister's summer 1943 refit. Arcona was once more refitted during the winter of 1943-44 to her final configuration. She received a 6 10.5-centimeter gun, forward supported by the replacement of the former 3-meter director atop the bridge with one equipped with a 6-meter rangefinder. A quadruple 2-centimeter mounting was fitted aft in place of a single mount of that caliber that had replaced the after searchlight 1943. On July 22, 1944, she was moved permanently from her customary location at Wilhelmshaven North, being towed around the Elbe estuary in front of the Kiel canal locks at Brunetta. Here she relieved Ariadne and protecting the canal against attacks from seaward. Contrary to the reports that she was scuttled into the second entrance at Wilhelmshaven on May 3, 1945, she was still there at the German surrender. Sometime during the 6 weeks that followed, she was towed to Wilhelmshaven and the crew discharged. It was believed that she had shot down 19 Allied aircraft during the war. Before we continue, I want to put up this excellent visual of their characteristics. If you notice, there are other ships on here, those being the Norwegian ones. Again, we'll cover them in a future video. Anyway, getting on to Medusa. Her rebuild was carried out by Rickmers at Wesemund from May to August 1940. Although the conversion was on the same lines as the Arcona, as essentially she was a bare hull before her conversion, Medusa looked rather different, where she had a slim new funnel and a mast supporting a dirk amid. Ships and lattice-supported platforms fore and after, each supporting searchlight. As with Arcona, her armament evolved over the coming years. On the 13th of August 1940, Medusa was towed out of Wassermundi, and on arrival at Wilhelmshaven, she was put into the variable deep of the Jade Bay, in a location 6 kilometers or 3.7 miles southeast of the dockyard. Connected like Arcona to the air defense network by telephone buoy, Medusa was declared for action on the 22nd as a part of the Marine Flak Optolong or Naval Anti-Aircraft Division 22nd, which was responsible for the defense of the southern side of the dockyard. In July of the next year, she had her gun barrels replaced and underwent a refit that lasted a month in October. As with Arcona, she had to stay in dock during the winter months due to ice. While she was there, she was badly damaged on March 13, 1942, when she was accidentally ran by a tug while moored alongside were Dodson and Nodelman. Describe her refit. The 4-week repair period included the stripping out of the redundant forward boiler room, requiring the addition of concrete ballast to compensate for the lost boilers and ancillaries, and its conversion into a crew recreation space. The work was largely carried out by the ship's complement using equipment provided by the dockyard, as the dockyard's personnel could not be spared for a job of such low official importance. When she was taken out of the dockyard once again for duty in 1943, Medusa had shields added to her 10.5-centimeter guns. As had been done with the Arcona earlier, Medusa saw further refits in July 1943, where 2 more 10.5-centimeter guns were added and rangefinders upgraded. In addition, the searchlights were improved and radar was added, with the dirk and funnel being cut down to give the radar uninterrupted all-around coverage. All great additions to the ship. However, in October, Medusa killed over and dry dock. Due to poor bracing, she nevertheless completed the refit as planned at the beginning of November and returned to her station on November 5, 1943, during which time Arcona had taken her place. That winter was mild, and therefore the flagships remained out on duty, where in mid-February 1944, Medusa was once again ran by a tug, forcing her to be dry-docked for repairs. With this opportunity, she was given quad 2-centimeter mounts on the port bridge wing in place of the twin mount. She returned to her station in early March. Medusa, like Arcona, basically sat around for the duration of the war, engaging incoming enemy aircraft when they showed up. And in such case, in mid-April 1945, Medusa was severely damaged by British fighter bombers being towed by tugs to the Greater Harbor, where she was moored at the head of a German word I can't pronounce. So, it's going up on screen now, as she was beyond the means of repair for the Germans at the time. 4 10.5-centimeter guns were removed and employed on shore on April 22nd. The remaining 10.5-centimeter and 1 quadruple and 4 twin 2-centimeter guns were ordered to be removed on the 25th, but it wasn't done. She was planned to be used as a block ship outside Wilhelmshaven's third entrance. Still, it was overtaken by the surrender of the port, and she remained afloat despite her extensive damage. Her armament was removed by September 1945 and moored alongside Arcona, Ariadne, and other ships we'll discuss in a follow-up video. We'll take from Donson and Nodelman for their fates. The final fates of Arcona and Medusa are complicated by the fact that while both vessels were afloat at the end of the war, with the Arcona, although not the bomb-damaged Medusa seemingly in good condition, the Allies' Transitional Naval Commission (TNC), charged with surveying all German warships during the autumn of 1945, noted both ships as wrecks. This placed them in Category C, which mandated that they be destroyed no later than the 15th of August, 1946. This was certainly what happened to all other significant vessels so classified. Ships still afloat were towed out into the Skagerrak and scuttled, and those resting on the bottom of the harbor were wrecked beyond hope of refloating by demolition and depth charges, then scrapped in situ. For Arcona and Medusa to have been made exceptions would be contrary to the great care taken by the British authorities at Wilhelmshaven and Kiel to comply with the letters of the Inter-Allied Agreements on the destruction of Category C vessels. The U.S. authorities at Bremerhaven were equally scrupulous. However, the same cannot be said of the Soviets, who delayed taking action until 1947. Although a considerable number of ships were then sunk, others were broken up afloat over some time. An interesting subject, I think. Let me know what you all think about the AA cruisers down in the comments and what other possible ships we could talk about in the Captured Vessel series, as although these cruisers were German, the rest of the ships were Norwegian and Dutch, while French, Danish, and other nations' vessels were put into service with the Kriegsmarine in some capacity. Anyway, please remember to like and subscribe as it'll help the channel to grow. Until next time, my friends, have a great week.